Last Pint Productions presents The New Way with Ben and Matt. The New Way contains adult content, such as Matt's nipples, David Cronenberg, and mouth breathers like Kristen Stewart. Viewer and listener discretion is advised.
Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Fell victim to one of the classic blunders. The most famous is never get involved in a land war in Asia.
Hello, I'm Edward Cullen. You're Bella?
Yes.
You shall not pass!
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Welcome again to the New Way podcast with Ben and Matt. I am Ben.
You are Ben, and I am Matt. We're going to get this right this time, for sure.
I just realized that I believe for every other podcast, Matt has opened it up. So I figured as soon as he started clicking record, I was like, I'm going to get the first word in this time.
I saw you, gearing up for it, and I was like, fuck him. Who does he think he is? I say Ben and Matt, Ben and Matt.
Well, you do have the perfect delivery, the perfect timbre.
Ben and Matt.
Ben and Matt. Which is funny because I was the temporary voiceover guy for Electronic Power Board of Chattanooga back in 2005. But that's a completely different story.
Oh, well, look at you. Amazing.
I'm the one with the radio voice, Matt. Actually, that's complete.
That was the worst radio voice ever.
That wasn't even my voice. That wasn't even my radio voice. Obviously, you have the big booming radio voice. But anyways, thanks for tuning in again. Of course, you can check us out online, our website, lastpintprod.com.
www.lastpintprod.com.
Thank you for clarifying once again, Matt.
/.
And, of course, you can go everywhere from there, but we're on Twitter at lastpintprod. Sorry. Facebook is /lastpint. So, anyways, that's good for me, messing everything up at the very beginning of the podcast.
We'll figure it out.
Anyways, we are kind of discussing a cool, interesting topic for me, and it dawned on me, actually, as being a good topic a few weeks ago, where I was on an online forum having a discussion, as I usually do on Rotten Tomatoes, and somebody had brought up the merits, and the funny thing is I forgot what particular film it was, and they were talking about scenes from the book that weren't included in the actual in-product or in-movie, and then I kind of went on this argument of why I felt like it was maybe necessary for them to leave out certain sequences that might not work well in the filmic context as opposed to the actual book that was initially reading. But it made for some interesting discussion, and so I brought it to Matt, and we decided we would talk about adaptations, things that had previously been novels or nonfiction stories that then became a film based off of the popularity of the initial medium of the novel or book.
Or just a good concept. I think there are, and I'm going to be hard pressed actually to get some of them. But there are times where a movie is made from a book that's not necessarily a hugely popular book.
What's funny is Alexander Payne, who is the director of Election, Sideways, About Schmidt, all those other really great movies. Did you know that About Schmidt and Election and Sideways and The Descendants are all books? The funny thing is, when in the production, at the beginning of production of three of those movies, the books had not yet been published.
Yeah.
Which was the case with Election. It was the case with Sideways. And basically, I think it was really funny, a guy like Alexander Payne was essentially surfing through these non-published things that were under the radar. So, for a couple of reasons. A, because he just said he liked a lot of those stories a lot more than some of the other ones that were more mainstream. But the other reason is, it's not... When you have a very popular book, obviously you have expectations in the minds of all those readers. I still remember when Cormac McCarthy published The Road, and it was winning a lot of awards, and it just gained this, obviously McCarthy with Blood Meridian and, all of the other books that he'd written had gained a large fan base, but people were especially excited about a movie version of The Road, and I was like, why?
Yeah. And that's the one they made with Kristen...
No, they made it with, it was Viggo Mortensen, and it ended up being...
What's the one that they just made, that Kristen Stewart just made one, maybe like a year ago, that was...
On the Road?
Maybe.
Or whatever it is, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was...
I know
right.
I know what you're talking
I'll let
about.
Ben continue to talk while I look this up on my trusty smartphone.
Well, anyways, I mean, there were lots of expectations being like, this is a very cinematic book, and it's very, drab and depressing. And it could have made for good cinematic material. And then I got excited when they cast Charlize Theron as although the woman character in the book is very minute, is only spoken of in retrospect. And then they got Viggo Mortensen on, and then John Hillcoat came on to direct it. And John Hillcoat is a fantastic director and has done some really, really great work. And the movie didn't work. It didn't sell. And there are lots of reasons for that. Lots of people love that book, and the movie followed the book pretty closely. A lot of the major moments, the major arcs are present. And for some reason, it didn't sell tickets, and it didn't find an audience.
It's because Viggo Mortensen's only allowed to be in like a certain number of successful adaptations, like History of Violence and Lord of the Rings, really locked him up pretty much for the amount of time that he's allowed to have good movies. They had to throw one crappy one in there, so he's not a superhero.
That could be it. But anyways, it is kind of an interesting topic, and so one thing that we decided we would do is think about some of the films that we've enjoyed or not enjoyed over, the past however many years that we've been watching movies that, because there's this huge disconnect. Obviously, a great book does not mean it will make a great film, and vice versa, basically. Sometimes there's a very awful book, or a book that doesn't work well at all, that may make a fantastic movie when you take the principal elements from it.
Yeah, and I think like we're kind of like broken this up into quadrants, but before we even get to that, because excuse me, essentially you have four types you can have. You have bad book makes bad book makes good book makes bad movie, good book makes good movie.
Right.
But then there are a lot of factors that go into that, and I think we can talk about some of those ahead of time. One of them is, does the fact that a book isn't faithful, or a movie isn't faithful to the source material, make it a bad movie? And I think that's, you can say that's not necessarily the case. There's no ironclad rule, because there are cases of things like, take The Shining, for example.
Right.
The Shining is a great book, and The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, that is almost its own totally different story,
Sure.
is a good film. It's just not the book. They're completely different, separate entities.
And it's kind of funny is that's one of Stephen King's favorite adaptations of his novels, and it's probably the one that departs from the source material, I would say, the most, at least stylistically.
I read that King was not happy with that.
No, but here's the thing. He wasn't happy with it when it first came out. I think now that he's older...
Yeah.
Because I still remember him talking about when I don't know if he still does, but he used to write the EW last page columns, like the hanging out with your Uncle Stevie or whatever it was. I mean,
Makes it sound so creepy.
well, it's just something because he calls himself, he's like, oh, I'm cool Uncle Steve. And every time I was like, I was reading it, I'm like, Stephen King's a geek, man. He is a dork. He is not that cool. And it's like, just because you're like, you love AC/DC and you had him score one of your films, the film that you directed that's awful. I'm speaking about Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah, well, what's awesome about King, actually, that's perfect for this podcast, is, for those of you out there that don't know, King has one of the greatest policies of any writer in the history of writers, which is you can option for a short film or whatever you want to do with it filmically. You can option any Stephen King story for $1. And that's his thing. And that's how he actually got involved with Frank Darabont. Frank Darabont optioned The Woman in the Room, which is one of his short stories from, I think, like Skeleton Crew or a different season. I think it's Skeleton Crew. Optioned it for $1 and made it as a short student film. Sent it to King, and King was like, this is really good. They kept in touch, and eventually Darabont went on to do arguably the two best King adaptations between Shawshank Redemption and Green Mile.
It's not that arguable.
No.
I mean, even when you're talking about movies that do well, like The Shining, and I still think The Shining is kind of a flawed movie. It might be Kubrick's weakest movie, in my opinion. But King has not done well on the big screen.
Yeah.
I mean, with money, I'm sure it's done well.
Oh, yeah.
But there are lots of bad adaptations of some of his work. Do you remember when Eli Roth was supposed to do Cell?
Yeah, I'm still waiting. And the problem is that they haven't just nailed the coffin shut on it. Every year there's some update that's like, oh, Eli Roth still working on, and I'm like, just either kill it or make it, because Cell is Stephen King's stab at the zombie genre. That's, with his love letter to Romero.
It's over.
Yeah, and I love the book. I think it does some really interesting things with the zombie kind of motif that haven't been done. And Eli Roth is a very interesting director, although I think there's a lot more character work going on in Cell that I like Roth, but I don't know what Roth's talent is, really, to be honest. He has not shown me anything outside of what he did in Cabin Fever.
According to Jimmy DeBella, who is an actor who I hung out with for an evening, I should invite him on the podcast. No, honestly, let me go on this side really quick. According to Jimmy DeBella, that I think Eli Roth's talent is getting all of the actors really hammered while they're making the movie.
That's one way to do it. Listen, I think Cabin Fever is fun. Cabin Fever is like Evil Dead. It's his intro to filmmaking, except that he has not followed it up with anything other than the Hostel movies, which the torture porn genre just needs to die and be tortured itself and put away. So I don't know if Roth is, back when they first announced Cell in 2005,
2006.
I was like, okay, maybe this guy, this will be the one where he breaks out, but whatever.
Well, here's my Jimmy DeBella story. Did I ever tell you this? I've never told you about hanging out with Jimmy DeBella?
Vaguely.
Maybe it could have been one of those late night conversations that we had. Pillow talk. Anyway.
That's between us.
No, this is a really funny story because I don't know. I've never met that many famous people. I don't know many famous people. The most famous person that I know and have interacted with on a relatively personable basis is Senator Bob Corker, who everyone thought was going to run for president and won't.
Not with that name. President Corker?
President Corker.
I don't know. There's just too many jokes built in.
No, and Bob's a really nice guy, but he's the most famous person I know, which is kind of sad. Anyways, I was at my hometown bar when I was in college, which was Big Daddy's. I played there. I worked there. It was basically just kind of my main hangout. And I was there with Luke, which Luke might eventually make an appearance on the podcast, even if he just busts in and says something like, "Get naked, bitches," and then runs away. Anyways, so Luke pointed at this guy, and he's like, it was late. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. He's like, "That's that guy from Cabin Fever." And I looked
at the one that plays the big dude.
Yeah. I mean, he's been in a bunch of movies.
Yeah.
He's always been sort of a character actor, and he's always playing either the stoner. He was in what's the Kiss movie? Detroit Rock City.
Oh yeah,
he's the stoner. He's the big tall stoner in that. Anyway, so I was like, no, that's not him. And Luke was like, I'm telling you, that's that guy. He was in that other movie too with Sandra Bullock, The Murder by Numbers. And
Sandy.
So I walk up and I'm like, hey man. You're an actor. And he was like, Jimmy, what's up? And he was really hammered. And so I'm like, hey, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm in film school here. He's like, oh, cool. And I was like, I just wanted to ask you a question. What was it like making Cabin Fever? I just saw that movie 2 weeks ago. He was like, it's the best experience of my life. And I was like, why? And he was like, well, I was drunk half the time. And I was like, oh, okay, awesome. And then so we had this 5-minute conversation, and then he said, hey, we're going to get laid around here.
Nice.
And then Luke's girlfriend at the time, Samantha, walks in, and he's like, who's that girl? I'm going to take her home. And funny,
how much did Luke sell her for?
Well, that's the thing. Luke didn't mind because this was a celebrity basically hitting on his girlfriend, which is kind of fitting.
He wanted to be Eskimo brothers with a celebrity.
Well, so here's the funny part, though. All of a sudden, so we're partying or whatever. It's 1:45 in the morning, and we're like, where's Jimmy? And he goes, where's Sam? And we realized that he got so drunk and was basically passing out at the bar that his girlfriend took him back to her house, and he fell asleep.
Nice.
Jimmy DeBella fell asleep on Sam's couch while trying to get into her bedroom, apparently, for part of the night, so they could have a liaison.
Have relations.
Anyways, it was a kind of funny story. Totally got off topic there. But
all right, so we're talking about kind of faithful versus not faithful, and that's
I kind of want to get into the faithful versus not faithful things. I think it's going to come about a little bit organically. The first thing I really wanted to talk about was good to good. Like I want to know a movie that was based off of a book where the book is either a standard or it's a great book or it's considered a classic, and it became a movie that warranted its affiliation with that book.
Okay.
So, what did you initially think of, like, when we...
Well, and I kind of, like, I wrote down sort of pairs for each of these just because it's a little bit easier. And one of them, I wasn't sure where to put it. I did put Shining for good to good in kind of a different way. I also had Silence of the Lambs, which is a very faithful adaptation, actually.
I've never read the book.
It's one of those that I was very surprised. Like, I saw the movie first, and I read the book, and I was like, this is pretty much, they put the book on film. It just looks, but they gave good visuals to it, and they have some of those great set pieces and good acting and casting. So I put that on there. And then the other one I have is, I kind of gloss over, Silence of the Lambs is kind of one of those you could argue that maybe it's not the greatest film.
Here's the funny thing about Silence of the Lambs. I've never read the book, so I can't judge it based off of that. But I can say that Jonathan Demme is one of those directors that it's all about the source material that he has working from. That he's working from. Jonathan Demme is either a fantastic director and just absolutely just crushes it and kills it, or his films fail epically. I feel like there's no middle of the road. There's no like kind of that's kind of an okay Jonathan Demme movie. It's either great or it's very bad. Unfortunately, I think he's made more bad movies than he has made good movies. But the good movies he's made,
he earns enough goodwill to.
Exactly.
And the other one I had is one that not a lot of people have seen, and it's one of the where I was getting kind of into that faithful versus not faithful. Is that my introduction to adaptations was the fact that I read a lot of your high school reading list, and the first thing I would do, I wasn't a huge reader as a kid. The first adult books I read were things that my dad or mom had that were off of things you would read at the airport. So there was a lot of Crichton, a lot of John Grisham. So I read The Firm and I saw the movie. I thought the movie was awful, just like a total abomination. Not that the book was amazing, but I was still in that mode as a kid of I want to go see the book on film. I want to see all these scenes in a film put together in the same order they are in the book with the same shit. I don't want characters combined into other characters. It used to drive me nuts. And one of the ones that I had to, it took me so long to track down was this really obscure British adaptation of 1984, which I don't know if you've ever seen, with John Hurt.
I have,
This is, 1995. I had to go to 7 Blockbusters and special order it for them to carry the movie. But it was one of those where I was like, wow, this is it's a disturbing movie to watch. It's unsettling, and what it does well is it gives you all of those same feelings you have reading the book of unease and just this weird place that you don't want to be in, and it's uncomfortable. It really translates that well. So I kind of had that as a good to good that was sort of on the obscure end.
That's awesome, because
on the Ben end.
I have never seen that. Is you're doing your best me impression right
I'm
there.
trying. That was also my best. That was also my best Ben impression.
Apparently, I sound like that.
That's 1984. I didn't get enough of a Chattanooga accent.
Oh God, you and John Reinsvold. He's like, hey guys, hey guys. Apparently, that's the way I sing too.
Yeah, exactly. If I was singing this, it would be a lot different. I'm not going to subject anyone to that right now. But 1984. That's my crazy.
That's really
obscure.
awesome, actually.
What's on your good to good?
My good to good is actually sort of a. Once again, funny enough, you mentioned reading list, because it's a reading list book, middle or high school. I forgot when I read it, but it's Eric Maria Remarque's book, All Quiet on the Western Front.
Oh, nice.
Which is obviously it's a classic. It's considered a classic. It's sort of one of those must reads for whatever grade it is that you go into. And I still remember, when I saw the film, and I'm talking about the I believe it was 38 Lewis Milestone, All Quiet on the Western Front. I wasn't that psyched for it because I was like watching it in class or whatever, or over the course of like 2 periods. And I was like, I've read the book. I don't really need to see the movie, especially in 1938 film. It's, a step away from a silent film or whatever.
Ben was only watching movies from the 50s at this point.
Meanwhile, yeah, exactly. The very opening scene of the film is in the classroom. It's this very poignant statement on propaganda. And I still remember there's basically the lecturer is teaching the boys about... he's not really teaching the boys. He's essentially propagating these kids to enlist and go serve for their country, basically. For reasons that aren't... Well, they're not on the up and up. Let me put it that way. It's all propaganda. And he riles... It's this long opening where he's talking about these different things, and he comes to this moment where he was riling up these kids, and it was just this brilliant thing that they didn't do back in those days, which was this intercutting of these extreme close-ups of all of these kids reacting, and there was just madness in all of their eyes. I mean, it was... And I was hooked. I was like, this is fucking classic filmmaking, and this is... it's perfect. And then the battle scenes, they've got these like dolly crane shots going for literally 400 yards across trenches. I mean, unbelievable for the time period it was made. And it's a faithful adaptation.
Yep.
It does the characters very well. It does depart from a lot of the minutia, but the overarching themes, and especially the ending, is very powerful. It works really, really well on all counts. It's a classic film, and it's a classic book. And so that's the reason why I kind of wanted to almost start there, just because I think we're going to have more fun when we sort of devolve into the...
and when we get to bitch about things. Which, and really, you'll notice with us, we're going to take probably equal joy in talking about things we love as we do ripping things apart. There is a sick joy in just bitching about something to a great extent.
Well, you know what? Let's go there for a second.
Okay.
Let's talk about
Good book,
some things.
bad movie?
No, I just meant let's go somewhere where we don't... Okay, let's hope we come back
Where do
from
you
this
want
for
to
a
go,
second.
Ben?
I would like to go somewhere.
Okay, let's go.
It starts with a T.
Titty?
It ends with a Twilight.
Oh, good lord. Titty Twilight?
Titty Twilight.
It's going to be my stage name. I'm Titty Twilights.
I like it, actually.
Yeah.
It's fitting. It suits you well.
All right, well, I will say one somewhat nice thing about Twilight. The first Twilight movie is easily the funniest movie I watched in 2008, I believe, is when it came out.
It came out in November 2008. You know how I know that? That was the first film I saw with my wife in the theater.
Wow, that is... God, I can't believe you ever married her after that. Was it her request?
No, yes, it was at her request. Here was what happened, and this is not my wife has very good taste in film and in books. She said, I read these books. They're the trashiest thing I've ever read, and they're awful. They're awful. I have to see this on the big screen. And I was like, fine, I'm in. And we went with some we went with some of her friends who were now mutual friends, and it was awful. And it was opening night.
It's hysterical.
Opening night with a bunch of screaming teenagers in the audience. It was the worst theater-going experience I've ever had in my entire life. Now, here's the funny thing. I've watched Twilight once since then, and I was just screaming with laughter. And the only thing I wanted more when I was watching it was hearing the riff tracks ripping on it. Because...
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying...
I had, oddly enough, my Twilight theater experience was perfection. Because I went with a friend of mine. I had been recommended the books. And by the way, just for those of you listening out there, Ben and I both have read all 4 of these. You read all 4?
No, I got to the third one.
Oh, okay. I have read all 4 of these abominations.
I literally got to the third book because Beth gave it. She was like, just so you understand how bad these are, I want you to read them.
Oh, God, the 4th.
And I nearly burned it.
You have to read
I
the
nearly
4th.
just took it and burned it.
The only thing I got really excited about with the Twilight books is it was said as a joke, but there was this like half moment of it was possible is that they were going to get Cronenberg to direct the fourth book. And I was like, oh my god, if Cronenberg just goes full Cronin on this and ape shit, it may be the freakiest, most amazing movie ever. But I
knew that was never going to happen.
No, but who knows? But so yeah, he did wind up working with Pattinson, and he's working with him again. He clearly likes. He really likes Pattinson. I think they were close on that one. I don't know, but I mean, they got Bill Condon, so for God's sake,
Pattinson said that he's a really big Cronenberg fan.
Yeah.
So I mean, it kind of makes sense. And Pattinson's, I'm not going to knock him as an actor. I actually liked Wild Ashes, whatever it was.
I have no problem with. Well, I don't. Kristen Stewart is very one note, but
Kristen Stewart does a lip biter,
and mouth breather, and just like just sits there like
lip biting mouth breather.
That's my impersonation. You couldn't see it, but it was amazing.
I'm gonna name my next dog Stuart.
Edward. So yeah, I had gotten recommended these books by friends of mine because I was a big fan of the Potter series, and I was kind of looking for another, easy series to get into. And they're like, oh, you've got to try this. They get a lot better. You got to get past the first book because it's not good. Which the first book is not good, but they do get progressively worse. So after I read these books and I ranted about them with all of my friends, which Ben does as well, we'll get to that in a second, but my friend bought me for Christmas, as my Christmas present, she said, I'm going to go take you to see Twilight. It was like easily a month after it opened. It was maybe like a week before Christmas. And she's like, we're going to go on a Sunday afternoon and just like go and make fun of this movie. So I go in there, and there are maybe like 10 people in there, but right behind us is like the cast of Sex and the City, essentially. Like 4 middle-aged women that all had like wine and pouches on them, and clearly had just come from. I saw this up at City Place. So they came from like that place where you get the smoothies, Wet Willies. Like they were clearly wasted, and were literally just catcalling at the screen anytime Edward was on, and moaning audibly behind me. So I was just like, "This is amazing." I'm laughing out loud.
They're all back there flicking the beam.
There's just a lot of it sounded like DJ record scratching. I don't know what that was, but like it was, and I'm laughing at every single thing because the movie is so. It's what's her name? Catherine Hardwicke. Catherine Hardwicke. Yeah. The movie clearly is trying to be an 80s movie. Every shot in it, every moment in it. If you go back in a time machine and subject people to this movie in 1986, they're going to think it's a really bad John Hughes knockoff, and nothing about that movie is futuristic. There's the shot of like him in the parking lot with the popped collar and the jacket, and it goes into slow-mo, and she walks into the classroom, and there's the fan blowing next door that wafts her fart scent or whatever it is at him, and he gives this look where she's like, ooh, like there's so many awful things in that movie, but I enjoyed the hell out of it, and it is a far more enjoyable experience than ever reading that book again, because that book draws the parallels to Romeo and Juliet. It hits you over the head with it. Romeo and Juliet I hate as well. I'm not a fan of Romeo and Juliet, but the one thing Romeo and Juliet does is it sets out to say this is a tragedy, and then it proceeds to give you a tragedy, whereas hers plays out, this is a tragedy, and this isn't going to end well, except that it does end well, because I can't bear to make any of my little characters suffer. So, Stephanie Meyer, fuck you. Yeah, I hate you.
Okay, well, I'll echo that sentiment, and I'll do my very brief rant on Twilight. Nobody who's going to listen to this likely has... I don't know anybody who's going to be listening to this. If they have teenage girls, or if they have girls that have read the Twilight books or are thinking about reading the Twilight books, the one thing that I've always communicated, and I did this very loudly and drunkenly at a family gathering once.
On a balcony in Delray with your mom and Gordon.
Yes. I believe that, and I mean this unequivocally and literally, that the Twilight series is the most damaging book ever released with the target audience being teens.
I agree.
I think that it instills the incorrect values in women and young girls. I think that it makes it okay that your boyfriend or your pseudo-lover, your guy who's really hot and obsessed with, makes it seem okay that it's okay that he almost kills you every time that he sees you.
No, Ben, I disagree, because I think that book is about teaching young girls to not be themselves and to hide their actual personality and their family and their friends in order to be the woman that the man wants so that they can please the man. And I think that's a really important value that in this age of PC-ness has been PC-ness.
I'm sure that it being written by a Mormon didn't have anything to do with that.
No, it's just a good old-fashioned
It's a
book
good
about
old-fashioned
make your
story.
man happy at all costs,
Anyways,
even if it kills you.
I've told Beth this before, and she disagrees with me. If there is only one book that I will tell my kids, my twin daughters, who are going to be here in a few months, I will never let them... They can go off when they go to college. They can do whatever they want to. They can read those books. But those books will not be in our library, and I will not allow those books in our house.
You know, you're going to build them into this thing where they're like, "Oh my god, we got to go read these Twilight."
And then
books 'cause
they're
Dad says
going
evil."
to be obsessed with it, and it's going to be one of those things that I have to live with. But
I see. I'm going to make my kids read them early and say everything in this book, from the way it's written to the subject matter, is wrong.
Is wrong and bad.
And I want you to just... It's going to be like, you know, your kid touches a stove the first time and they learn, oh, this is hot, don't touch the stove. I'm going to teach my kids, don't read
you could also
Stephanie
create
Meyer.
you could also create a monster that way, but anyways. I digress.
I would love to create a monster. That sounds fascinating. Now I need children.
Oh, God. Well, anyway, so we'll move away from Twilight because neither of us like it. Obviously, I'm not going to go on a ridiculous rant on it, but basically I think it's damaging.
Subjugation of women.
Honestly, hide your kids, hide your wife. I mean...
Everybody's getting bitten in the neck. I'm sorry, they don't get bitten because they don't have fangs in the Twilight.
Now, here's one. So here's what I want to move into now. How about we talk about a bad book that made a good movie?
I have a couple on this list here. One of them I'm not sure because it's not necessarily a bad book. I just think the movie was far superior, and I was a little disappointed when I read the book because it's a little bit of a mess. And
so you read that. That's another thing because it's also interesting
which
as a
you do
viewer
first.
to what happens if you watch the movie. Because I watched Jurassic Park before I read the book, which
That's on my list here in a different section.
Exactly. So we'll talk about that.
No, mine is The Princess Bride, which is one of my favorite movies, and funny enough that it's one of the few that's the adaptation. The screenplay is written by the author of the book, William Goldman, and I didn't read Princess Bride until well after I saw the movies. Like I was probably like a decade after I saw the movie, and you're making a very funny face over here.
I'm just smiling.
Okay, all right. I feel like you're about to drop the boom on me in some way, but the book is not bad. It's just I think the movie is a much better version of the book. In the same way that I think that and we'll be talking about this in another podcast, but I think that Wicked the musical is a much better telling of the story than Wicked the novel is. I think Wicked the novel gets completely lost and is very poorly written, and I think the musical does a much better job of saying, here's the basic story, and here's a better way to go about telling it with the same beats.
What's the name of the guy that wrote Wicked? And wrote
Gregory
yeah,
Maguire.
Yeah. I don't like Wicked the book either, and I love the musical, so I agree with you on that. Here's the funny thing about Princess Bride. I saw the movie before I read the book as well. I find the book, Princess Bride, hysterical. I love that book.
It is.
And it's completely different. But even that whole, like when he's, there are parts that are skipped out on in the movie, and it's one of those things that's kind of fun to talk about. Remember how, to get to the pit of despair, he had to go through like the three... the dungeon with the three things. And there was like the spider that was the most dangerous spider of all time.
Yeah.
I really love that book. I think that's a fantastic book.
I maybe need to reread it again. I think it's one of those that I was so ingrained in tune with the movie.
And just so you know, and here's the thing, and it's also Goldman's brilliance because he did write the screenplay.
Yeah.
And it goes away completely. Goldman writes the book in first person. Just like he'll get to a critical point in the book, like a cliffhanger, and then start talking about how his kid is overweight and eats too many mashed potatoes. Literally. I mean,
there's some great satire.
But the funny thing is he's writing himself fictionally. He was Charlie Kaufman before Charlie Kaufman.
This is true.
He is writing his own family history and what's going on in his life fictionally. And it's hysterical. It's just so funny because you'll be reading and you get to this point and the Princess Bride, and then he's like, so then I was at dinner.
Yeah.
And my fat ass kid kept on piling mashed potatoes on his plate.
And it's very much what the movie does. They just do it with the kid and
Exactly.
the grandfather in the story. But it's one of those, like, it literally was floating back and forth on my list. Mainly, I just want to talk about The Princess Bride because it's such an awesome movie, and it's one of those books it is a very heady book as far as it's super political satire.
Oh, sure.
All the stuff that are like one-off lines in The Princess Bride when they're talking about Florin and stuff there's like whole economies set up for these cities and these realms and stuff. But that was on my good, bad to good. The only other one I had on there, and it almost doesn't even count because the book is sort of ridiculous, but I had Jaws as a bad book made into a great film.
I think that's actually it's broad, but it's good.
Yeah, and I think they made a lot of really good choices when they adapted.
Here's what I had for bad book made into and here's where you might start disagreeing with me.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you've ever actually read the book. I don't really know
I'm not a big reader.
A whole lot of guys.
I don't know how to read so strongly.
The book, The Bridges of Madison County.
Oh my god!
By Robert James Waller is a bad book. It's it's basically what's his face, the guy who does all of the teeny bopper,
the editor in chief of Tiger Beat. I don't know where you're going with this.
Who does like all of those, like A Walk to Remember and all of those other?
Oh, the guy before Nicholas Sparks or whatever.
No, he is Nicholas Sparks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Nicholas Sparks.
Oh wow, he was like doing stuff that far back. I thought he was more of a modern invention.
Well, no, Nicholas Sparks is a modern invention. I'm saying Robert James Waller was doing the original version of that with a book like The Bridges of Madison County, which I read I was in middle school before the movie actually came out, and I read on a recommendation from my English teacher, who I trusted and whose son was a good close friend of mine.
I trusted you.
But it's just like this completely like ridiculous. It's written from a woman's point of view because it's all taking place. Basically, it's I don't know if you've seen the movie, but the woman dies and the kids find her journals, and basically they go through it and they find out that she's had this 4-day romance with Robert Kincaid, who is this one guy who showed up. And he was he was from National Geographic and looking for the bridges of Madison County, and he was going to take pictures.
That's in the movie. That's
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood.
So in the movie, which was directed by Clint Eastwood, who I'm not a huge fan of a lot of his directorial stuff. I do like some of it. The movie basically just cut through all of the bullshit, all of these long, flowery passages where this woman was talking about what she was feeling, which is great. I've kind of got something else along those lines on my list here when we're going to be talking about bad movie and bad adaptation, or bad book and bad. But it was a terrible book for me to get through, especially at that age. However, I saw the movie right when it first came on video, and obviously it's great when you've got Meryl Streep, doing that sort of thing. But something about that movie, which I forgot who directed. Oh no, it was Clint Eastwood. Eastwood directed it. Eastwood and Streep, just with that story, worked. It was a simple love story. It was a simple sort of one-off type of thing. And I remember watching the movie and being like, that book was made to be made into that movie. The movie's great. The book is just kind of this crappy sort of, where they go off on all these tangents. And I don't know. I really dislike that book, and I like the movie. So
there you go. All right, well, we got, now we need to do good book, bad movie, which could be a long list for people. But
obviously, that's a long list. And I'll start.
Okay, you do that.
So you can go ahead. And I'm going to keep it relatively brief because everybody knows why the movie is bad, and everybody knows who's read it why the book is good. Funny you mentioned Crichton earlier.
Oh boy.
Crichton is the king of having great books, which are a lot of them. A lot of the books he wrote were great books.
And they're very cinematic books, which is always what surprises me when they botch it.
Sphere is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And Sphere might be Michael Crichton's unheralded masterpiece.
It's a really deep book.
It is an incredible book. I still remember my best friend from high school read 3 books in his entire life. One of them was Sphere. He's read Sphere like 17 times.
They did make a good adaptation of Sphere when it was called The Abyss. But
Still completely different. Yeah, I mean, obviously, but and the funny thing is I was really stoked for that movie. I'm like, Barry Levinson was coming off of Wag the Dog, which was a great movie.
It was a good cast. It was cast
Dustin
decently.
Hoffman, Sharon Stone,
Liev
Samuel L.
Schreiber.
Jackson, Liev Schreiber. All of these great, Huey Lewis. Do you know that Huey Lewis is the helicopter pilot. He's wearing an Orioles hat. You know how I know that? Because of Nick Santacroce.
I know that because I was like, why the fuck is Huey Lewis flying a helicopter at the end of this movie for no reason?
Nick Santacroce is 9 feet tall, and he knows every bit of movie information ever. He knew that he gave Huey Lewis that Orioles hat that he wore at the beginning of the speaker.
He taught Huey Lewis how to fly a helicopter.
Anyways. So,
yeah, that is a astronomically poor film off of a ridiculously good book.
Yeah.
On my good to bad, I also have a controversial Michael Crichton one, which is Jurassic Park. I think Jurassic Park is a film with a couple of amazing scenes that are pure Spielberg, but as a whole, the narrative, the characterization, other than Ian Malcolm, as played by Jeff Goldblum, who does an amazing job of making it. That's the perfect way that you make, because in the book, Ian Malcolm is like this balding, geeky mathematician, and they made him like sexy and cool in the movie, which was a great idea. Had they done that with the rest of the characters and the plot and worked a little bit harder on that, I think it could have been an amazing film. As it stands, I think it's it's got some amazing scenes, but it's a poor film. And on the same one, and this book has been tried, they've tried to make it into a movie twice. Once, they made a good movie, but it's not really the book, or it doesn't feel like the book, which is Willy Wonka. The original Willy Wonka, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which the original was called Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah. And then they make it with Gene Wilder, who's nothing like the Wonka in the book, but it's a really interesting movie, and it's a musical. And then I hear that Johnny Depp and Tim Burton are doing a new Wonka, and I'm instantly excited because pretty much Wonka in the book is Ed Wood. Like, that's all I was picturing. Is that Depp is going to be in Ed Wood mode and stuff. And they made some just ridiculously bad choices with the central character, with Wonka. Everything else in that movie actually works. They do a good job with the kids. They keep to the source material with everything else except for the main character for purpose, as far as I can tell, just for the purpose of doing their own little thing. I think when Burton and Depp get in a room together, and I'm sure there's some sort of substances involved,
yeah.
And they're just like, I imagine that they're just fucking around. They're just like, what if? Wait, listen. I'm gonna play Wonka as Michael Jackson, and Burton's like, no, we can't do that. He's like, no, people totally will buy tickets if I play Wonka as Michael Jackson. And he's like, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. I agree with
that. That's a good one. So here's kind of the part where I just want to talk about a bad movie that was made out of a bad book.
Yes.
Just bad to bad. And we've gone past Twilight because we know that that's bad to bad, or bad to gloriously, wonderfully bad.
Yeah.
The one that I wrote down was actually, it's considered a classic. For what reason? Who the fuck knows? Because it's one of the most awful books ever written.
Wow.
Which is Nathaniel...
Pride and Prejudice.
Oh. You know I have a soft spot for my Jane Austen. No, I'm going to say Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter.
Yes.
Awful book.
Agree.
Just terrible. I mean, yeah, I understand this type of language wasn't used that readily in the 19th century. Who the fuck cares? It's not a good book. There is nothing that's going on in that book that makes it even remotely interesting.
But she says bosom. There's a heaving bosom.
They're talking about morals, and like there are so many better books of the period, better novels of the period that talk about like these ethics and morality. The reason why that it was considered a classic, why so many people bought it, is the same reason why people buy Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey today, because it was titillating to them, because there was nothing else like it on the market. There was nothing else that was talking about these like sexual themes. It wasn't allowed. just because something isn't allowed, or just because you're going on some sort of tangent talking about some sexy or lusty sort of fantasies, does not make it a good fucking book. It's,
oh my gosh.
Sorry.
Wow.
I'm going into rant mode here.
Wow, that's amazing.
Anyways, to say, moment of clarity, moment of silence there. The 1995 film is cast decently. Demi Moore, Gary Oldman. You've got plenty of reasons for that.
I don't
movie.
think Hester Prynne had fake boobs, though. I was always a little bit... I was always pissed off by that, and I was like... I mean, Demi Moore, strong actress, but those things are so clearly fake.
That movie is awful.
I was afraid the A was just going to pop out from, one of the boobies.
That movie has my favorite actor, Gary Oldman, and it's awful. It's an awful movie.
Yeah,
it's so bad.
Yeah, it is a very, very bad film.
What do you have?
It's funny, I had written that on my list, but I didn't list it. For bad to bad, and it's funny because these are two things that are bad for completely different reasons to me. I picked The Hunger Games, the first Hunger Games book, which Mockingjay, is that what it is?
No, the first Hunger Games is just called The Hunger Games.
It's just The Hunger Games, but then you have Catching Fire, and then the third one's Mockingjay.
Mockingjay, yeah.
So yeah, I was very late to the game in the Hunger Games. Late to the game. Kill me. So I
You came in after 3 tributes had already died. You're like, hey guys, what's up?
What happened to Peter? So yeah, I watched the Hunger Games movie. I almost couldn't make it through the movie because and I love Gary Ross. I think Gary Ross and he was a great choice for that movie. I thought the aesthetic of the shaky cam and this idea that you never get, like, I understand that he's trying to do what the book does. The book keeps you inside Katniss's head the entire time. You don't ever go outside of her POV. And so he tries to do that in the movie through shaky cam to make you unsettled and you don't know where you are. But the fact is, if you're watching an adaptation, you want to see what the city looks like because you've read about it in the book. And you want to see what the games... you want to have time to process this shit. Now, I was thinking that even before I read the book. I was thinking about and we'll get into series in a second. But... I was thinking about with the Potter movies, you always know your geography and where you are, and they do a great job of letting you look, like, really breathe in the set design and the costumes in this world to immerse you in it, versus the Hunger Games almost felt like it was trying to keep me from getting these things. And so I remember just not really enjoying the film, and then I kept hearing about how phenomenally bad the third book was, and I kind of like reading a train wreck, so I'm like, I gotta read these books so I can get to the third one and find out the problem. I didn't like the first book. I actually preferred the other two a little bit more, because here's where both of them screwed up. The movie has got some very bad directorial touches. However, because it takes you outside of Katniss's head, you get to see what's going on with the game makers and all these things. When I was reading the book, I kept waiting. I'm like, when do we go to see Wes Bentley with his crazy facial hair? And when do we, all these things weren't happening in the book. And I was like, God, neither of these, if there's some happy medium between these two, I think there's a decent movie and or book. But each of them on their own are very poor.
What was the other one that you have?
I had Twilight, of course.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and I made a list of these. There's, we briefly touched on things like Shawshank Redemption and Green Mile. Those are just gold standards. I had one on here that was going to be kind of in the same space as Good to Good for different reasons, but I remember hating the movie the first time I saw it, which is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I don't know if you've ever read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
I have.
It's a trippy book, and the more I read about Ken Kesey, the more I think that maybe it's not as deep as as it's made it seem. But I remember we studied that, and the whole book, you're inside Chief Bromden's head, and there's all of the schizophrenic delusions and visions he's having in the fog and all this stuff.
Right.
And then you get to the movie, and first of all, Jack Nicholson is he's personality-wise, but he was physically so different from Randall McMurphy in the book, which is this big Irish redheaded dude, like a Cole Hauser type,
right.
And it was one of those where after I went back and watched the movie years after, when I was able to get over the fact that this isn't the book. It's all I used to think. This isn't the book, so it's not even worth my time to get into. Once I matured past that, when I was last year, I would watch these things. I'm like, that's actually a really interesting movie and some great performances, and it's a great book for very different reasons.
It's one of the few movies that has ever won Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Picture in a single year. The others being Silence of the Lambs, the aforementioned Silence of the Lambs,
and Silver Linings Playbook. Met that. They got the nominations.
Nominations. Anyways, pretty interesting stuff. So, yeah. Well, anyways, those are some interesting adaptation choices. I think we've gone through some funny notes. So I kind of want to wrap it up. And do you have any? Do you have the fun question this week?
I didn't plan on one, but I'm gonna allow Ben. I'm gonna give Ben. I'm feeling nice tonight, and I know Ben likes to do this, and he knows I hate it. But since we're talking about adaptations, and Ben is a big Lord of the Rings fan, I'm going to ask him a question. He's going to answer said question as Gollum. Now, Ben does a fairly good... I see you getting ready to do it. I fucking hate this. It creeps me out. It is not an enjoyable thing. But my question to you, what do we want to hear Gollum say? My question is... I totally was busy thinking about the books. Do you have a question for me first, and then we'll get to your Gollum?
Okay.
Look how I just threw you off. He was like hunched over in Gollum pose, ready to do it.
I'm a character actor, damn it. I'm not going to ask you the question because that would be really creepy. I was going to ask you kind of a funny question, and it's not going to pertain to your sexual history.
Oh God,
it's not going to do any of that. I was going to say, because it was actually kind of funny because somebody asked me this last week, or there was something. What is the worst you have ever hurt your own manhood? Like, what's the worst nut shot that you've ever received in your entire life?
I'm trying to think if there's been one more than this, but this was a classic Matt moment when I was in like 4th grade. I was at the lunch table, and we had this like big assembly thing, and I was fascinated with physical comedy. I just wanted, like, Matt falls down and goes boom, made people laugh, and I'm like, I'm going to do this all the time. So I pretended to fall off my stool, like the thing I was sitting on at the lunch table, and I caught one of my boys. Like, I pretty much was, like, held hanging, probably my, like, 170-pound 4th grade body, hanging from one of my nuts, and then hit the ground. Like, the most intense nut pain I remember, and everyone was like, Matt, like, did the fall down? And I was like, and I got back up and got my chair, and I just hunched over the entire rest of the time I was there, and I threw up in my mouth. It was awful. Like, I probably should have gone to the nurse, but I didn't want anyone to know that I actually, like, fucked myself up, but it was painful.
Meanwhile, your right nad is still like mad at you.
It's still in Scottsdale, Arizona, at Cochise Elementary. If you've seen my testicle, please mail it to me in Boynton Beach, Florida. I'm like, I feel that I need to like make the impression match the question. So, okay, what is the most self-conscious moment you had about being a geek? Like, has there ever been a time you're having a conversation and someone overhears and you're like, fuck, creepy. Oh.
Precious, why do you ask this question?
I'm not playing along. Oh, am I supposed to be like, I'll be John Rhys Davies.
And my axe.
I don't want to do Gollum on that question.
All right, what's
No, I can actually tell you though, and without doing.
How about what's the dirtiest thing you've ever said to your wife?
No way. Oh shit!
You can't turn down the question.
No, but I honestly don't know. I still remember there was this one time, and this will suffice as an answer to that question. There was one time when we first started dating where I was intoxicated.
No.
Imagine that. I was intoxicated and things happened, apparently. And then the next day, same as like Paul and Angela's story about our good friend Paul. It was the best man at my wedding. His wife apparently, like, one day it was like, woke up and was like, "Oh baby, you were amazing last night." And he was like, "We did it last night?" Because apparently he was so wasted he had no idea what was going on.
And she doesn't think they'll ever be able to replicate.
Yeah, exactly. He's never going to get back to that level of performance.
He was, for one evening, the most interesting man in the world.
Exactly, he was. No, but the same sort of thing happened where it was like, she was like, "Wow, that was some really dirty stuff you were telling me last night." And I was like, "What was I saying?" And I just imagine myself like looking back at it, like in my own head, just saying like completely random things, like that guy from Girls or whatever, where he's like, "I'm gonna take a toothbrush and I'm gonna scrub your boobs, and I'm gonna grab a bottle of wine and pour it over your face and just do something ridiculous." I have no idea what I would have said, but who knows? There's nothing, I guess, that was out of bounds at that point. We've been dating for a few months.
Maybe you dressed up like Mr. Clean and like conquered her fear, and you're like, "I'm gonna clean you up tonight, baby. I'm gonna clean you all up good."
Yeah, who knows? Maybe I pulled the Naked Man.
Oh, your wife said you should have pulled the Naked Man.
Yeah,
She was
I never
upset
pulled the
that you
Naked Man.
Unfortunate. Well, we didn't really talk about it, and we're not going to waste you guys' time anymore. But I think
we're not going to waste you guys time.
I don't talk so good. I don't read so good. Okay. Two honorable mentions on this list of adaptations, and actually I'll make it 3. One is the film Adaptation by Charlie Kaufman. Right. That is, if you have not seen it and you want to get into the head of a screenwriter and a novelist, it's an amazing movie and some amazing performances. But Ben and I each have our favorite, probably, series turned into films. Mine is the Potter books, which I think there were flaws for sure as far as the adaptations, but overall I really feel the catalog of those 8 films exemplifies what I liked about the books. And Ben is a big Lord of the Rings fan,
right?
So, and I think that those are, you could do a lot worse than those movies as far as sustaining an entire universe over several films and doing a great job with it.
Yeah.
But anyway, you can find us, since Ben usually does the cap at the end. I will do it this time since he stole my thunder at the beginning. But you can find us at www.lastpintprod.ca.au. That's Canada, Australia, which is a new country we're actually testing out. You can find us on there.
We're beta testing.
We're beta testing that country. We're basically find us on our website, and especially go to /podcasts. That'll show you all of our episodes. We should be getting close to like 10 or so in a little bit, so you have a lot to choose from.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course you can go on Twitter and stuff, or follow us from there. Who the fuck knows? Whatever. Just go wherever. We'll be everywhere.
I'm on LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn. I totally forgot about this. That you can actually, if for some godforsaken reason you want to do business with us, we do have a company profile on LinkedIn, which you can find by looking for Last Pint Productions.
I haven't been on LinkedIn in 7 years.
LinkedIn is the future, dude. It is going to catch on
It's been around for 7 years.
It is Ben, I'm telling you, it's poised.
We are ending the podcast now.
Why?
Please check us out on LinkedIn. Also, check us out on lastpintprod.com. Yeah. This has been The New Way with Ben and Matt. I'm Ben.
I was so uncomfortable to watch. Ben, first of all, was just about deep-throating that microphone there. And if you see this mic, it looks like a big cock. So Ben was just like cuddled up as close as he could get. I almost knocked things over. And Ben has just left the podcast. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers!
Cheers.